Welcome everybody, and thanks for attending. Okay, welcome everybody, and thanks for attending my PhD defense. The thesis is about the role of non-governmental. No, they come later. Yeah. I think you can have a seat. Okay, once again, I have to welcome you because I'm so happy that you all are here. And this thesis is about, as I said, about the role of non-governmental organizations in promoting sustainability of small and medium-sized enterprises in Peru, focusing on the networks and the discourse involved. The research brings new issues in the picture, such as the environmental concern in small and medium-sized enterprises in Peru, and the local global interplay of non-state actors. In this way, the research set the basis for a new research field for the future. The research aims to provide a better understanding of the changing roles of non-governmental organizations in promoting sustainability of small and medium-sized enterprises in the country Peru, using the perspective of networks and discourses. The research questions have to do with identifying the main networks and discourses of non-governmental organizations promoting sustainability of small and medium-sized enterprises, focusing on the domains of organic production, business social responsibility, and sustainable production, and pointing out the main changes, and finally, contrasting the findings with the theory of network society and the theory of ecological modernization, as you can see on the slide. The network society theory and the ecological modernization theory are the theories used to frame the research. The network society theory argues that the current society constitutes a new type of social structure characterized by two emerging social forms of time and space: the space of flows and the space of places, as said Castells. The concepts of network governance, arrangements, cooperation, power relationships have been key to frame the research. The ecological modernization theory is aiming at understanding how modern societies are dealing with the environment. Institutional transformation, environmental rationality, and market dynamics are also key concepts to frame the research. In terms of methodology, the social network analysis and the discourse analysis are used to frame as analytical tools in this research. Social network analysis is a useful tool to study the social structure and institutional interactions. Discourse analysis is helpful to understand the shared ways of looking at the world, what is called discourses. Both analytical tools, the discourse analysis and the network analysis, were combined to analyze the networks and discourse relationships. Three case studies were developed to explore the joint networks of non-governmental organizations and small and medium-sized enterprises and the discourse involved. The first case study, the organic production, focuses on the relationship between non-governmental organizations and the producer associations and small food enterprises. The second case, the business social responsibility, focuses on the relationship between non-governmental organizations and local companies. And the third case, what I call the sustainable production case, focuses on the relationship between non-governmental organizations and local industries. The three cases include national and international non-governmental organizations and small and medium-sized enterprises oriented to the local market and also to the international market. Data were collected in Peru, my country, and also in the Netherlands, including primary and secondary data, using qualitative research methods. Looking at the key actors, their connections, and their views on the environment and the market, 10 networks and 7 discourses were identified in the 3 case studies. Just to show as example, you can see in the figure the networks of organic production case. Networks are organized in platforms from local to global scale, where national and international non-governmental organizations are the key actors. Networks show several patterns of collaboration and also a struggle for power. Depending on their closeness with social movement or liberal market views, the discourses of sustainability of a small and medium-sized enterprise highlight the issue of justice in the market and the issue of sustainability of the market. It means that market is approached in the discourses from 2 different angles, the social justice angle and the market performance angle. That means that in the discourses they bring the issue of the social issues to the market. One of the main conclusions of the research is the emergence of non-governmental organizations as a market agents. This means that next to the conventional watchdog roles that traditionally non-governmental organizations have been playing, they also are developing roles of helper in order to make small and medium-sized enterprises greener. So the main shift in the networks and the discourses of sustainability of small and medium-sized enterprises is the more central position of collaboration and a more central position of liberal market in the discourses also. Research also provides evidence that small and medium-sized enterprises have power. For instance, in terms of influencing and emancipating from key actors. The main theoretical implication of those changes have to do, first, with the less dichotomic understanding of the space of places and the space of flows. That means that both are important when we frame sustainability. And second, the need to consider social considerations such as employment and working conditions are important next to ecological rationality in order to advance environmental governance of small and medium-sized enterprises in developing countries, particularly in Latin America. Doing a research was, for me, a successful, but I have to say, a fulfilling experience, mainly. Being back and forth between Peru and the Netherlands. This was just a great experience all these last years. It was an intercultural experience also for me. Searching not only for knowledge, but also for meaning. Maybe in this room there are not so many people physically, but I see all the seats full because there are many people that are not physically here, but they are in my country. And that brings a lot of happiness for me. Thank you very much for your attention. Okay, looks like I managed well the time. So anyway, why not to say a few more words if you don't mind? Okay, actually I'm really glad to see you all here. I'm back after 2 years here in Peru. So for me it was nice to see you again. It looks like not much time has gone. And all of you looks as young as I left you. And I hope also me. I think it's amazing also how much we wait this time, no, in all our years, no? First starting with designing the proposal, and then try to make sense the research, then doing the field work. Years come, years go, and then we finally come up with the book. Finally, we see materialize what we were doing the last years, and then everything is summarized in just a few minutes, and that is, I think, it's a mystery behind how people just can see your book and say, okay, you did it, no? And you can read the book and you can try to get the feeling of how was really doing that book. So that means that all the experience of doing a PhD, you hardly can summarize in the book, no? There are many things that you cannot just write. Even you cannot just tell, but they are, no? Like sort of around in the book. But I hope that when you read the book, you can somehow feel that spirit behind of the motivation, what was behind of writing this book and coming up with the topic, no? Because I have to say that, well, I have plenty of time. I have to say that this topic of NGOs, or what is called NGOs, for those who are not familiar, they are the non-governmental organizations, and the small and medium-sized enterprises came out as a sort of personal experience, you know, sort of things that I grew up in the middle of entrepreneurs and people that do business, no, in order that survive. As you will see in the book, that context that we have in Peru is quite different that we have here in the Netherlands. So, and then people has to make their life based mainly in bringing new ideas and developing products, on bringing something to the market. That's how people make their lives there, most of the people. So for me it was nice to bring this issue in the research arena, and then share with you with all these things that can bring in the research and the international level, no, in the academia, about NGOs and medium-sized enterprises. Yeah, we keep for after the defense. Thanks, Sander.
Please be seated. I hereby open this ceremony, convened by the Academic Board of Wageningen University, in which Walter Victor Castro Aponte is offered the opportunity of defending a thesis with propositions entitled Non-governmental Organizations and the Sustainability of Small and Medium-Sized Enterprises in Peru, an analysis of networks and discourses. The defense will take place before an examining committee appointed by the academic board as a prerequisite for conferring the degree of doctor. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to welcome you to this graduation. My name is Pierre de Witt. I'm professor of phytopathology and member of the academic board, and in this capacity I represent the Rector Magnificus today. I would now like to call on the first examiner, Professor Arce. He's Professor of Forest and Nature Conservation Policy at this university. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Rector. Respected candidate, first of all, I would like to congratulate you with your thesis. I read it with great interest, interesting NGO research and their alliances with small businesses. I think your thesis is empirically rich, also theoretically maybe a bit provocative. But overall it remains a bit descriptive to my taste. So I would like to discuss with you some aspects of the theories you use. My first question is the following. The main theories in your thesis are ecological modernization theory and the network society. Both theories have been developed within Europe. They have European authors, scholars, and origin. So why do you think that they are applicable to your country, to Peru?
Highly esteemed opponent, thank you very much for your question. The theories that I have used, they are applicable for the following three reasons. First, networks, NGOs are engaged in networks of global reach. That means that the networks where NGOs are part of, they not only are in the, let's say, in Peru, they are widely extended to the regional level, and also they have connections and ties with European NGOs and actors. So they are globally connected. So that means that the theories that I have used, they stress this issue of connection. And also, this is the case for the network society theory. And for the case of the ecological and modernization theory, also bring pretty much the issue of the environment as a necessity in society to reform in terms of environmental reform, to bring the environmental reform, to bring environment to the much more central position in society. And those considerations were key in my research issue. That's why I decided to work with them, with those framework.
Okay, thank you. You referred to this ecological reform, and that brings me to the next question. These theories are also developed in the beginning of the 90s, referring back even to the 80s. So these are, well, not to say old theories, but they exist for some time, and implied in them are some, to my mind, some optimism on ecological reform within the states and ecological rationality within the market on the one hand, and optimism in terms of a shift from more traditional ways of governing to more new modes of democratic governance. Okay, we are now, let's say, 20 years further, yeah? And if you look at the state of affairs today, is this optimism on ecological reform and more democratic forms of governance, is that still justified? And even more so, is that justified for your country?
It's clear if we see in one hand the research so far, but also what is going on in the practice. Environment is taking more central position. But also, you're right in the sense that how much is going to the center, how much is really playing a central role in society. And I would say cases like I was looking at in this research shows that if some optimistic comes, wouldn't come from the state. At my case shows they are coming from civil society or business actors. So I would say they are the actors who are bringing or trying to answer how we can bring environment to the more central position in society. And in that sense, I would say that a lot of insights is bringing these cases for finding a better way of arrangements or how society can deal with this issue of environmental governance. And related with because the two questions that you might have as related, unfortunately, from the country where I come from or the region where I come from, not much theoretical also studies. Most of the universities of people has involved in research, they operationalize theories. And it's a pity because we over there has a plenty of new insights and new inputs that can help much to understanding all this, what is going on with environment and the issue of reforming in society and at the global level. So at least this is the idea of this research, bring new issues, new understanding, new insights, and bring to the academia, to the arena, so in order we can discuss that.
Yeah, this is a nice bridge, so to speak, to my next question, because I was wondering what you did to update these theories from the 90s with the new insights from your country. And I know in your last chapter you're reflecting upon the theories, but could you again say how you renewed these, to some extent, in my mind, already old theories?
Okay. I will summarize my answer with two ideas. First, I would say one of the main contributions, for instance, in the case of the ecological modernization theory, is that, of course, reality is different in Europe and how also the theory has been developed. And I think it's clear that environment has to go to more central position next to the economic rationality. That is clear. But what I found out from my research is that, for instance, if we want to address small companies, small and medium-sized enterprises in countries like Peru, we need to consider the social rationality. We need to consider issues like working conditions. We need to consider issues like employment. So those issues that are not strictly in the environmental rationality, but those issues are so close to the small and medium-sized enterprises. And those issues, as we saw from the research, from the case studies, can contribute much for further greening, let's say, to move the small and medium-sized enterprise in the path of sustainability. So this, I have to say, one of the main contributions. And the second one, contribution of the research has to do with this issue of collaboration. Collaboration that is going beyond of a single type of actors, in this case as the collaboration between the small and medium-sized enterprises and the NGOs. And the collaboration, not only NGOs that are located in Peru, but also NGOs that are located far away places like in the Netherlands. So they are connected, and also in the case of a few small and medium-sized enterprises that are connected with in the value chain with more larger companies. And also usually those larger companies are far away. But then, besides that they are not in the same place, they are connected. Why they are connected? Because they have something in common, like shared values. In this case, issues related with sustainability.
Okay, thank you. Do I still have time?
Yes, there's still time for a short question. Yes.
Well, the topic is power, and that's never short. But anyway, let's try to keep it short. On page 43, you define your conceptualization of power within the concept, within the framework of network society. And you mainly define it as flows of resources, connections, and values held by key actors. So your power perspective is very actor-oriented. And then I'll ask myself, what about the power of the network structure itself, or the power of discourses, some more power processes at the structural level? Did you take that into consideration? And if not, why not?
Might you reframe your question? The last part, please.
Well, let me put it into question. Is it true that your power conception is mainly actor-oriented?
Yes. Yes, because...
Okay, thank you. Then my next question is, why didn't you take into account the power of the network? So the networks also have power over actors.
Yeah, I will be practical with my answer. The point is that as this research is pioneering, so using networks and analysis and discourse analysis and bringing together to understand roles is something new. So this idea of mapping first to know who they are and what they are doing, with whom are working, and how is those relationships in terms of power was my main aim in this research. That is why I frame. But it would be nice to see these networks from different angle also. I think that will come as a next step, probably.
As a next research, maybe. Okay, thank you, Mr. Rector.
Thank you very much, Professor Arce, for this interesting discussion. I'd now like to move on to the second opponent, and that is Professor Te Mulder. She is Professor of Science Communication at the University of Twente. Please.
Okay. Respected candidate, I've enjoyed reading your thesis on the role of small and medium-sized enterprises and NGOs concerning issues of sustainability. And I especially liked your combination of network society and ecological modernization theory, and the attempt to integrate the use of the concepts, networks and discourses. Being a discourse analyst myself, my question concerns your use of this type of analysis. Could you explain to me what, according to you, the additional value of discourse analysis has been in your thesis compared with a standard, so to speak, qualitative content analysis? What struck me in your analysis is that although you do present interview fragments, these fragments are used more as an illustration of the content of what the respondents have been saying, rather than that they seem to be analyzed as a piece of discourse, deserving separate and more elaborate analytic attention. So my question to you is, what makes your analysis of these interviews a discourse analysis? And could you also give me an example of that?
Excuse me, the last part, may I get examples of what?
An example of why you think, what is the discourse aspect in your analysis? Could you give me an example of that?
Okay. Highly esteemed opponent, thank you very much for your question. In this case, if I want to understand the roles of an entity, in this case NGOs, if I identify the actor, I understand the power relations and the cooperation and the relationships in the networks of these actors. Something was missing there. So, because this actor relates with the other actor, but what is the motivations for these connections? So, I must bring some approach that help me to find the direction with whom to work and with whom don't work. So to understand this rationality behind, I used the discourse analysis, because discourse analysis helps to find out the values behind of the people action. In this case, action of institutions like NGOs. So issues like the viewpoints of the actors were key to frame the discourse. And my approach to discourse also, I had to make a choices because we can approach discourses from different angles. And I use more from the structural perspective to approach the discourses. So I didn't go in depth, really, like looking, for instance, the issue of language, for instance. No, and I think in research more like ethnographic research. Other type of research also is, they use this approach. But in this case, as my aim was mapping the discourse. So, because this is, let's say, a virgin field, no? It's hardly to know what NGOs are thinking when they cooperate with small and medium-sized enterprises. And also, so far it was hard to know why small and medium-sized enterprises cooperate with certain NGOs and not with others. So, and then I would say to finalize my answer, I had to use a more a structural perspective to map the discourses and not really go deep in the words that they use and the way that, for instance, they frame when you read in the part of, in the section of metaphors, for instance, and has much richness, those metaphors, to go further even in the analysis of the discourses.
So what is then the key difference between illustration of the content of what people say and a piece of discourse? Is that you are referring to values, to metaphors, to what would you say is the key difference?
Key difference between
a piece of discourse, as you analyze it, and a qualitative content analysis.
Okay, I have to say, I know much studies of environmental discourses also, no? So I was also to find out at the beginning from which angle I have to look at the discourses, and my source of inspiration was one study of Dreisegg that he more or less framed the discourse and the environmental discourse analysis from the angle of from more a structuralistic perspective, and I realized that was a good tool to start this mapping. So I said I couldn't go further with this issue of more in-depth analysis of discourses.
Okay, thank you. A second question concerns the relation between the two central concepts in your thesis, networks and discourses. Can you tell me a little bit more about how you think they are related, theoretically as well as empirically? Let me give you an example. At page 117, you talk about the rise of new discourses of organic production that materialize in the emergence of new actors, and that is NGOs and small enterprises you refer to. How, I'm interested in, that is on the basis of what do you reach that conclusion? So how are the two connected to each other, and how do you as an analyst know they are?
Okay, thank you for your question. They are connected I would summarize in two main ways. First, as a network means connections between entities or actors. In these connections, of course, will flow resources, but also I said values. So, and then networks also are the place where discourses can flow through the networks, or through one network, from the one network to other network, or from one actor to the other. So these connections are not just for issues like knowledge or funding, in this case of NGOs. So fundings also flow through the networks. So, and then meaning also, values. And around that values, around that meaning is where actors cooperate. So that's, I see this relationship, the networks and specifically the ties and the connections between actors are the means through them goes also move discourses and storylines. And the second is also discourses can be originated in a setting of networks. Network is a rich space where actors interact. So as an interaction comes, new discourses can come in, or new insights of a discourses, or new new ideas, new ways to frame issues. And I would say those are the main issues, how networks and discourses are related.
And how then would you say, do they materialize? Can you give a little bit more reflection on that?
Can you help me with in which part is this, in order that I can...
Well, in the quote I gave you, you talk about the rise of new discourses that materialize in the emergence of new actors. And I can see that you define that relationship as vice versa, networks and discourses, but where does the materialization come in there? Can you say a little bit more about that?
Do you mean, excuse me, the materialization of the discourses?
How do then networks emerge in practice, or how is the relation between how discourses are put into material, whatever, relationships?
Oh, okay.
I realize this is a big question, but can you give me a little bit more insight about how you think about these relationships?
Okay. I think in practice, for instance, because the second part of your question has to do with a more practical view, and I think in practice, those networks of NGOs are so close with small and medium-sized enterprises, and then a small and medium-sized enterprise have a particular way particular values when they engage with small and medium-sized enterprises. And with NGOs, and the NGOs also, they have a particular values or rationale behind when they act in these networks. So, and then this interaction, I think, is this interaction of two different aims, because actually small companies are not the aim of bringing let's say, some help or support to somebody, as NGOs do. So it's clear that a small, medium-sized enterprises, the main aim is to bring products to the market and play in the market. So this is clear. But both were clear in their roles. But this interaction is bringing new, is enriching both sides. On one hand, small, medium-sized enterprises are understanding that they must also, they need the help, they need the support. So, and they need to look at also the social side. And then NGOs also realize that if they want to support the small and medium size in the market, they cannot use the same values that they were using before. So they have to learn the values of market and the values on how to perform in market. So that is where in this place how they in the local level and the practical level, how they enrich both networks and discourses. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Is there time for?
I think we have to stop here. Thank you very much for the discussion, Professor Te Mulder. We now move on to the third opponent. And that is Professor Knorringa. He's Professor of Private Sector and Development at the Institute of Social Studies and at the Erasmus University in Rotterdam. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Respected candidate, I have also very much enjoyed reading your thesis, and I have three quite different questions. The first one is critical in terms of something that I think I disagree on with you, to get that out of the way. And the second question is more something I want to learn from you. And the third question is more practical, I think. So my first and more critical question is about how you treat the role of the state in your research. You come to the conclusion that in environmental governance we're looking for governance without the state. Towards the end of chapter 8, this is the way that you finish. I want to take issue with that because in my experience, if you look at environmental and social governance initiatives in the last 10 to 15 years in many different countries, I think the conclusion of private and civic initiatives is basically that they can only go so far unless they are able to also bring in the state. And of course I understand that you see an ineffective, perhaps a corrupt state, and you want to look for an alternative. At the same time, my conclusion from all other kinds of research is that without bringing the state back in one way or another, many of these initiatives will not be able to actually sustain themselves. Could you respond to this issue?
Highly esteemed opponent, thank you very much for your question. Yeah, it's a hardly difficult question actually, because but something I will speak clearly. A state must be there, somehow some actor that coordinate and play the role that a state is playing. That is not the business role, and that's not the role of civil society. That is, I have cleared that. But let's say in the case of Latin America, in the best case, they will play again a secondary role. They cannot be, even if they are important, and a state must be there, but they are not anymore the main actor, the center where all the decision has to come through. Because even in the base case, that wouldn't work, because it's something related with the structure of how is a state, which at least in Latin America, and particularly in Peru, have shown that doesn't work anymore. So, and you are right in the sense that I agree with that the challenge to sustain this new initiatives, like I described in my case studies, cannot be sustained for long only with NGOs and small and medium-sized enterprises. Somehow, or they, in one hand, maybe a state in Peru has to take a more serious its responsibility, but on the other hand, also, those platforms where they coordinate, in the networks, I highlight the issue of the platforms, of the coordination hubs, might be a space where new kind of state can emerge. I don't know. I'm not sure that's. But if we are thinking of the state of something that is in the government, if we must change that, maybe that won't work. So those platforms can be a space of a new sort of governance mechanism.
Okay, if I may follow up a little bit on that. So there might indeed be a middle ground where we're not talking about governance without a state, but I think you are saying governance with a more modest, more serious state that is perhaps not playing a leading role, but more a role that follows things that come up within society? Again,
to build up traditional states in Latin America or Peru is not feasible.
No.
So, and then the question will be, if we are talking about some different kind of states, is a state, we can call that a state, or we will call something else? Mm-hmm. For instance, if those platforms that are key in all these connections between the global and the local, that is the platforms and the networks that I described, if they evolve and they start taking more leading positions and role in society, we might call them a state, or a sort of kind of a state, or not. That is the questions that bring this research.
Okay, so perhaps to conclude on this first issue, a different role for a state may be decentralized state. There is a middle ground, perhaps. So, indeed, the argument is not a black and white issue in that sense. Now, on the second issue, what I found one of the most intriguing parts of your thesis is you identify two modern discourses, as you call them, liberal market discourse and the social movements discourse, as two fundamentally different ways of viewing life, social relationships, economic relationships. And yet, this relates to the optimism point that was made earlier. You indicate that you see possibilities for NGOs working on the ground to actually reconcile these differences in the way in which they engage with small, medium enterprises on environmental issues. I would very much like to believe this. So I would like to ask you to tell me a bit more about why you seem convinced that reconciling these fundamentally different discourses at local level is actually possible.
Thank you for the question. Again, I would say difficult to answer because even if these two, let's say, discourses they are opposing, you know, the social movement discourse and the liberal market discourse, of course, in the discourses of these case studies show that somehow they are bringing these two issues together. But as I state also in the research, they are not free of tension. Mm-hmm. Tension has not vanished, and the struggle for power has not vanished. That is something clear from the cases. But what makes different of the previous struggle between the traditional, let's say, more conventional liberal market discourses and the social movement discourses is the issues at stake. The tension now in the sustainability discourses of a small and medium-sized enterprise has to do who is with sustainability and who is something like against two. So just to make in simple words. So, and then no matter if the actor is in the local level, in the international level, wherever might be the actor, if share values in terms of sustainability, so they will be engaged. So, and then tension, I would say, is there, and then the question might be how they are dealing the tension, because they are working together. So somehow they have mechanisms in the discourses and in the relationships, in the networks, in order that they can overcome tension and at least reduce the effect of tension. And what they do in the most of the cases, let's say the organic production case is the much more richer in this issue of how deal tension. The commonalities that they have weigh more. So either they, as you see in the organic production, there are some discourses really strongly highlighting the issue of market, and others more really talking about the adaptation, or even others of the, a fair relationship with market. So they are quite different, but they are working together in the same platforms because they are, like for instance, against of the, or they are standing together against to issues like the pesticides, for instance, or the GMO food. So those things has more weight for them that bring them together. No? And of course, in other networks like sustainable production, they have a much more very different approach. They just don't collaborate. Each one is doing what they have to do. Even if they have commonalities in the discourses, they are not working much together. So this is also another way to bring tension. No, don't talk to the other. No, just to avoid interaction. So I don't know if this is enough to.
Well, I would like to follow up and sacrifice my third question if I get a chance to.
Yes, if it's short and a short answer, please.
Yes. Because I find this fascinating, but I would like to take it one step further. You keep referring to the networks. What about the individuals? In my own experience from research that one does on these sorts of issues, there are always these few more charismatic individuals that make such a difference in these types of networks. Could you give me one example of a person that was able to actually reduce these tensions in a way that it was convincing for the people around them that would otherwise be caught in these tensions?
Yeah, I found several actually, but I will refer just one of them. I think beyond the who is this person, the characteristic of this person has to do with a style of leadership, I think. Mm-hmm. So somehow these, inside of the key actors, also there are key individuals. And those key individuals has the, let's say, the power, let's put in these words, of connect to people and appeal people also. They appeal using their personal discourse, their personal viewpoints, which people also get that they are also sharing. So I would say is the leadership style of this person, which is, and in that sense, again, organic production network and the business social responsibility networks also in a bit less extent, but they both are rich with these two, with these leadership styles that is playing a major role at individual level, I would say.
I hope you're satisfied with this answer. Well, thank you very much for the discussion. We now move on to the fourth opponent, and that is Dr. Arce. He's Associate Professor at Rural Development Sociology Group at this university.
Thank you, Mr. Rector. I want, if it's possible, first I want to congratulate you for a really exciting and social relevant, I think, study. And following some of the questions, I wonder if you could actually read to see proposition number 2, and from there I want to make you see some questions. Thank you.
Non-governmental organizations cooperate with small and medium-sized enterprises and business actors using rationalities related to the space of places and the space of flows.
My first question, listening quite interested in terms of the answer you have provided, that seems to me that and in the thesis, in some way, you see it's demonstrated that somehow you explore discourses, but we need to go beyond discourses. And this is the relevance of the notion of network. But at the same time, if discourses are not so important because degrees of transformation are taking place there through this kind of other connections, how could you describe network as something more than just connections?
Highly esteemed opponent, thank you for the question. In the research, I describe networks, mainly three characteristics of networks, or three components, let's say, and connections is one of them. And next to the connection is the key actors, and next to the key actors and connections are the power relationships. So those three issues are, at least from how I frame the research, the three main components for understanding networks.
Can I follow? Key actors, power relationships and connections, when they interact, don't take you beyond what you call rationalities? And if we need to go beyond rationalities, how do you call the kind of agreements, conflict, and sometimes you see new solutions that actually come out from this kind of encounters? If it's not something just like ecological rationality or social rationality, what else could be there? You already have mentioned values, but what else could be there?
Excuse me, might you reframe when you say beyond rationalities, what do you mean, just to get it?
Well, for instance, you mentioned values, but I want you to be more specific. What do you mean by the term values, or by the term you see of alternatives?
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, in this case, there is a boundary also in the discourses, and the boundary is set by some key ideas where all the actors get around to. For instance, let's say the value of a liberal market, for instance, is something that no matter how close are to let's say with social movement views, but again they agree with market. And others maybe are a bit much more further with the social movement views, but they share this idea of market. So issues like a market, or issues like the central position of environment, for instance, has been two of the main issues around with these actors get around to.
For instance, if I follow Marisol de la Cadena kind of understanding of Peru, I mean, she will argue that there are different values in terms of market and environment in the Andean communities, and totally different, for instance, you see in Peru or in some kind of urban centers. How you actually play with this element that perhaps you see you are confronted with different values within the network. And perhaps you see this is what allows different interpretation of the central discourses that are circulating, you see, in terms of the neoliberal economy, for instance.
Yeah.
How do you deal in some way, you see, with this kind of alternative values in operation in Peru?
Yeah. Networks are exclusive. When networks, they start to relate each other and to expand, if the network feels that something is not in the network interest, they just put them away. And in this case, of course, there are other values, like in countries like in Peru. Let's say much more from the cultural values, for instance. In some extent, they are in this small and medium-sized sustainability discourses of these networks. So, for instance, let's say in the organic production networks, we can see clearly, specifically in those who raise the issue of democratization of market. So, but not really the cultural issue is in these discourses.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Arce for this contribution and the questioning. I adjourn the meeting and the examining committee will now withdraw for consultation.
say that it's out of office. So of course I can say
Please be seated. I hereby reopen this meeting. The Academic Board of Wageningen University, represented by the Deputy Rector Magnificus and 6 committee members appointed by the Academic Board, having noted the content of a thesis entitled Non-governmental organizations and the sustainability of small and medium-sized enterprises in Peru, and analysis of networks and discourses, with propositions, having heard the defense of the thesis, has decided to confer the degree of doctor on Walter Victor Castro Aponte, born in Huánuco, Peru, on June 6, 1974, and to grant him all the rights and privileges ensuing from that doctorate by law and custom. The Academic Board assumes that you accept all your duties as a scientist to execute your future research ethically and with due diligence, according to the Netherlands Code of Conduct for Good Scientific Practice. I now invite the promoter, Professor Mol, to acquit himself of his duties.
You have heard the decision of the Academic Board of Wageningen University to confer on you, Walter Victor Castro Aponte, the degree of doctor. It's now my honor to present you with the degree signed by the Deputy Rector Magnificus, the promoter and the co-promoter, and sealed with the Great Seal of Wageningen University. I first invite you to sign the degree as well. With this signature, you declare to act according to the Scientific Code of Conduct in the future. Allow me, Mr. Deputy Rector Magnificus, to offer my congratulations and to pass the judgment. Dear Dr. Castro Aponte, dear Walter, it is really an honor to congratulate you, also on behalf of Chris van Koppen, with your newly acquired academic title of doctor. Today you showed that you deserve that academic title, but it was not self-evident that you would arrive here. Your PhD study has been a lengthy process, and I must admit that at several occasions Chris and I wondered where, when and how your academic journey would finalize. Now that we know the answer to that, we, that is of course the exam committee, can also make up the balance. Your thesis stands out as the first, at least to our knowledge, detailed study of NGO SME collaboration on sustainable issues in developing countries. As such, it is a unique and path-breaking work. Your work is also particularly strong for its originality in combining network analysis and discourse analysis, not as two separate research methods, but integrating them in the end for concluding the major shifts that have taken place in NGO SME collaboration. Finally, your work is very interesting in how it applies, and I think in a very nice way, to theoretical frameworks that seems to fit rather well in your research, ecological modernization theory and the network society. And with that, you place yourself, of course, in a very nice and solid ENP research tradition. But of course, there exists no academic work without room for further improvement. The committee found that the empirical work and data analysis could have gained a little bit more depth and sophistication. And also that the thesis in the end misses some major opportunities for further reflection on more theoretical aspects and consequences. And I think we have also discussed some of them today with the committee. Overall, the committee judges your thesis as satisfactory with some good elements. And the committee judged that you did defend your thesis in a good way. Congratulations with these results. Allow me now, Mr. Deputy Rector Magnificus, to give the floor to Dr. van Koppen for the laudatio.
Highly esteemed Dr. Castro Aponte, dear Walter, the world is one, but it has many different stages. Today you performed on one of those stages, the one of academic education. And on this stage, it's worth noting, you have just played the final level. Of course you can, and we hope you will, pursue a further career in social science. But from now on, there is no external educational standard to meet. It is you, yourself, who will define the game and will set the academic aims to pursue. Your thesis and defense show that you can do so. Let me just highlight two characteristics to underline that. The first characteristic is that this thesis already, in many respects, is a product of your personal aims. It fits in well with the work of the Environmental Policy Group, as Arthur has noted, but it also clearly bears the marks of your own social commitments and interests. You are engaged with local farmers and small companies in Peru and the ways they can develop socially, environmentally and economically. And you have been able, this engagement is a red line through your PhD work. And you have been able to translate this engagement into scientific terms and to find a balanced view between, on one hand, engagement with traditional local development and, on the other hand, an open eye to the importance of access to domestic and global markets. This is not an easy balance. We have seen that in the defense. But it's one that looks promising for the further study and advancement of small enterprises in Peru. Second characteristic is your strong commitment and perseverance. As was mentioned, it was quite a long journey we made together. According to my archive, you started with your PhD proposal in 2005 and have been working on that over all the years until now. An important cause for delays was that in the meantime you had to perform on several other stages as a developer of educational materials in the Netherlands and in Peru, as a husband and a father of a son, as a promoter and performer of Andean folk music, as a facilitator of summer schools for children in Peru, and probably on several other stages that we have no idea of. But where many others would have quit, you continued the work, you remained friendly when we sent back a chapter full of comments for improvement, and finally delivered the book. Arthur and I congratulate you with this achievement. We hope that this PhD, rather than a final round, is the beginning of much more. And we hope and expect that this PhD will help you in further advancing the commitments and interests that motivate you on the academic stage and on the other stages where you will perform. We know you are strongly attached to your family, and while they cannot be here, they will certainly share in your achievement and joy today. We gladly extend our congratulations to them. Finally, we also thank the committee in helping us to judge the quality of Walter's work, Alberto Arce, Bas Arce, Peter Knorringa, and Hedwig de Mulder. Thank you all very much for your work in this. And these were my concluding words.
Thank you very much, Dr. van Koppen. Thank you very much, Professor Mol. Dear Dr. Castro Aponte, dear Walter, this marks the end of the ceremony in which you successfully defended your thesis in public. And also on behalf of Wageningen University, I would like to congratulate you with your degree of doctor. I'd also like to congratulate your partner and son and your parents and sister. Unfortunately, they could not be here today, but I'm sure they followed you through internet. You worked on sustainability, including sustainable agriculture. That is very important for survival of our planet, or planet Earth and its inhabitants. And being flora or fauna, including man, which can improve the world but also can destroy it, I think. It's good to get all types of non-governmental organizations involved in this process, together with small enterprises. They develop new roles, and as understood, I learned quite a bit also this afternoon, because I'm a plant pathologist, but I think your country, Peru, is very important for sustainable agriculture, because it is together with its neighboring countries, it's the gene center of solanaceous plants. So many fruits that we eat nowadays, be it tomato or paprika or pepper or potato, they all originate from that area. So they are all genes that we have either brought them in by crossing. And I think that has really worked out very well in the future. Maybe you remember the book from Rachel Carson, Silent Spring, where they've used all the chemicals and now we can reduce them. So for that, Peru is very important for the whole world because we can introduce those plants. As we heard already from your promoter, your PhD has been a long way. I had an informal meeting with you this week, and I heard indeed that you started in 2005, and you've been back and forward several times because it was a sandwich project, as I understood. Been back and forward several times between Peru and the Netherlands, but finally you made it, and congratulations again. It's also, I'm also glad to know and to hear that you have a job in a related area at the institute. It's called Latin America de Ciencias in Peru, and also linked with an institute in Spain, where you will work on further development of this. I was also very glad to see you have written 4 abstracts of your thesis. In English, that's a requirement, and in Dutch, maybe not in the future, but you did it in Spanish. And in the language which I probably do not pronounce correctly, Chicwa, the native language of South America. Well, finally, I would like, and I would congratulate you again. You are a Wageningen graduate. You will be a Wageningen graduate for life. And I hope you stay in contact with your alma mater. Finally, I would also like to thank the committee members here. It was already said here, but I would repeat that your input is very much appreciated. It keeps the Wageningen thesis and the quality in a national and hopefully also international context. So thank you very much, Professor de Mulder, Professor Knorringa, and also the 2 professors from our university. Thank you very much. And I hereby close this ceremony.